It is so exciting to be speaking with you all at this 15th anniversary of this conference. I have been in this community since its inception, really. The first and second conference of Games for Change were held in Washington Heights in a basement. So it's it's a group that has really transformed and matured really fast, and a community that has done so. One of the most important and seminal things that sort of launched this field was a book by a professor by the name of James G., who I'm sure you all have heard of, or many of you have. And so I was in education. I've been in education for 27 years. And for the first 13 of those, I was president of Teach for America, a Teach for America teacher, a school principal, and greatly kind of restless and disillusioned. And then a group of us thought, there must be another way to do this. And part of my work here is as a result of sort of following my instinct that there's another way, and this community that I got to be a part of, the Games and Learning community, is why I'm here. And if it weren't for the work of what this community has done over the last 15 plus years, and I'll give a quick retrospective of it, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here. Standing here now, and the work that I'm able to do wouldn't be possible. So these days, I am the Chief Strategy Officer for this organization, for Teach the World Foundation, and we are an organization that is really trying to do something that keeps me very humble every day, which is really trying to take the work that we've learned over the past 15 years and more, and try to take it global, to work with children in the poorest countries in the world, and use games to raise literacy rates. These are officers. Shafiq Khan is someone I decided to join to do this work 2 years ago, because we've been working as faculty in universities and in not-for-profits. And here, Shafiq, a businessman all of his life, decided to leave his role as the executive vice president of Marriott to launch Teach the World. And this man is actually responsible for how we manage a particular part of our lives. So he invented digital booking for travel. So how we book our hotels and flights comes from something that he thought about in the 90s. So I'm very lucky to be working with him, and also someone who just has a lot of experience in digital work. Shireen is our director of operations in Pakistan, based in Pakistan, and Imran is an MIT professor who is our director of development, and that's me. While we're trying to bring games to the world to try to tackle the illiteracy issue, I thought I'd first sort of ground us in what's sort of the state of affairs as it relates to literacy. Many of you probably know all this, but I think it's good to ground us in these facts, just because before I went to work globally, I was at the Gates Foundation giving grants in this space for games and learning and assessment, for research and development. Before that, I was here in New York City. I was one of the founders of the Quest to Learn School, and working with Katie Salen, very fortunate for me, building the Institute of Play. All of that, as grounded as I was, and I grew up really poor here in New York, as grounded as I am in all of that, I really didn't know what was the state of affairs for the global world. for the state of education globally. And it's just, for me, it's what wakes me up every day, just because the conditions are so dramatic. And so we have the potential to have real impact is huge. So I'll leave you with those. Before, telling you, I thought I'd show you a little bit about our work. And so here is somewhat of a short video.
It is delivered in a format that is gamified, so that it is engaging and so that it motivates the child to make their best effort.
Teach the World is a radically new and creative approach to literacy for kids in the developing world, harnessing the power of new technologies.
So one of the first things we decided we would do is to create our own evidence that this concept works. We went to a community in a depressed area of Karachi, recruited 22 children who meet the United Nations definition of out-of-school kids. These are kids who have never been to school, ever. Had them come into a classroom. Day one, started to teach them on tablets.
When these children came, letters of the alphabet, numbers, colors, everything was new to them. They were not familiar with anything. They were taught only how to open and shut the tablet. They were mesmerized by what they were learning.
One of the little girls we had is a girl called Iram. When we did her pre-test, she, in some ways, flunked completely, but in another way, she passed the test royally because we wanted to get kids who knew nothing.
It took her, I would say, more than 6 weeks, Iram, to show progress. But after 6 weeks, it was like magic. She started to tell me numbers, she started to sing nursery rhymes. It was just like one day. I heard somebody singing aloud, and that was Iram.
When these kids came in, they had no level of reading or writing, and 3 months later, 100% of them are reading and writing the entire English alphabet. They're doing counting, they're doing basic math. Some of our administrators are amazed that they haven't seen this level of transformation of kids, even in some of the most elite schools in the country. It proved the concept for us that having the latest technology combined with an environment where kids are incented to learn, combined with an engaging mechanism that keeps their attention, becomes a very, very powerful catalyst for radical, immediate transformation.
Sadiq was clueless about colors or numbers or names of animals. When he came, he started working on the tablets. And once he was confident that he's picked up the basic, there was no stopping him. 5th week or the 6th week, I discovered that he was calculating in negative numbers, like -3 - 2 equals -5. I mean, I was simply amazed. He has not stopped. He started doing crossword puzzles, a lot.
Technology is just not as intimidating for kids, we see. And this point about giving life to things for kids is especially powerful, that they can make things happen in this medium, unlike they can in lots of other environments.
3 months of working in this classroom with 23 children, with our tablets and the apps. Today, I'm a big believer of this technology-based learning, that it can deliver, it will deliver.
So that is the kind of work that I am able to do now, mostly because of what has happened here. So I just wanted to take a moment and give us a quick retrospective of this community. and kind of take you to what I find so impressive about what we've been able to do over the last 15 plus years. So in earnest, this work started with Seymour Papert in the 1980s at MIT, where sort of the thought that computers and games could be useful means with which to teach. And then it began again, like I said, with Jim G's book and others doing research. And so what has happened over the last 15 plus years has been this kind of research and development, institution building of places like this conference. And then what has been most amazing to me is that what we have now is a whole international community really taking up this work and creating a common language with it. So one of the things that really has undergirded this work has been this notion that we have to pay attention to learning, to really understand learning, which is sort of that games served as a good metaphor, as a good analogy in which we can see how learning happens. And at some point I made this list because I take it for granted that these are the things that we all understand about games. And I'm not so sure that's true. One thing that's great to come to this conference and see is a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of new faces. And every talk that I give, I talk about why games. And I thought I didn't have to at this conference, but one of the earlier speakers was doing this, talking about why games, and I thought maybe I should touch on that too. And these are the things that games allow, and when we study what is it that allows learning to happen, these are the kinds of things, right? Real deep immersiveness into a space, making things relevant, having deep social collaboration, application, which all equals engagement, right? Or fun. So if you imagine how a chemist comes to be a really great chemist, it's because all of those top four things happened. And for that person, for her, that chemist, that was all really fun. So I started to talk about learning. So the work that we did was really trying to put a focus on what it means to learn, because as a principal, as a school teacher for myself, I knew a lot about teaching for many years, but nothing about learning. Nothing, right? And so that my training was such that I learned to teach, but I did learn nothing about what it means to learn. And so this community really tried to change the focus into let's understand learning. And so here we have in 2018 the World Bank's most critical report, and the title of it is Learning, right? And calling for the whole global community to really pay attention to what we have now as a learning crisis in global ed. And then we have this comes out also in 2018 by an organization, All Children Reading, which is a collaboration between USAID, UNICEF, UNESCO, the World Bank, put together this funding organization to fund grand challenges, and they come out with this report. In it, by the way, is featured Antura and the letters. I just call it out, and it's featured as a case study. I call it out because it is one of the games in competition here at this conference in the categories of best learning game and most impact game. Anyway, so these are the kinds of things that this community has enabled, right? Has really informed the world about things, how to think about games. In this report, James G., Zimmerman and Salen, Fullerton are cited as people to learn from in terms of when developing games. So I want to tell you a little bit of our model, and I call it a working model. We've had unbelievable success. But I'm still thinking that it's too good to be true, and I'll tell you what I mean. So first, our model begins by carefully selecting geographic partners. So we go through this really intense process of trying to find partners around the world with a track record of success. These are the partners we are working with now, really incredible groups of organizations that have focused on education in those countries. So we have our geographic partners up in the upper left from my side. You're right. And what we have are these kinds of sort of three parts to our model. So there is the TTW Learning Program, which is a one-to-one student to tablet ratio, 1 to 30 student to facilitator ratio, and then curated game-based content. And I have facilitator there in red because what is most striking, perhaps, about this model is that there are no teachers at all. So that children are really learning on their own. So we have 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 9, and up to, we have a group called Working Children for children who work starting at the age of 9 and are unable to attend school. So we have a group of like 9 to 30 and then early childhood. So there are no teachers whom are required for this model. And for us, these stats that I that I showed earlier, by 2030, the world expects, to have an acute teacher shortage. So we are very deliberate in wanting to address that issue. So we have no teachers who are required. We do train a facilitator who is able to keep a safe space for children and who is able to manage technology, turn it on, turn it off, and that's about it. Which is no small thing, it's no small skill to learn, it turns out. We work with our partners around around a process of training them to build capacity to run these programs, and that's a very collaborative process that we are still refining and perfecting. And then our work is very much driven by assessment and research, and I'll tell you some of those outcomes. We are using off-the-shelf content, and these are the apps we are using. DragonBox at this conference last year won Best Learning Game. So we are using DragonBox, Numbers and Big Numbers. Footsteps to Brilliance is a very deep literacy app for grades K through 3. And we are looking for, especially because our work is about to transform itself into working with a very large refugee community in Bangladesh, the Rohingya community. We're looking for a social emotional learning app. We've identified some, would love your ideas. So these are our outcomes to date. This past year, I'll show you our numbers. This past year, we had about 210 students in phase 2, in the phase 2 column there. And these are the outcomes. And we haven't released these yet publicly, though I guess I am doing so now. This is what happened. The TTW students did 2.5 times better than those students who received traditional instruction over a 6-month period. And what was really interesting to see was, so we gave a baseline, a midline, and an end line over that period. At the midline, we saw that from midline to end line, the pace of learning went even faster. So they show a 3 times greater gain. So very, very encouraging that that we're having these results. These are what we're expecting to do over the next year in these geographies, and with this year being where we're making a huge bet. And if you don't all know about the horrible atrocity that has happened recently in the last year, especially with the Rohingya refugees, 1 million people literally walked from Myanmar to Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And they've asked us to help. We are working closely with the World Bank and UNICEF, and we'll be beginning a pilot as soon as the monsoon is over. We are in the middle of the monsoon in Cox's Bazar with the Rohingya refugees. And we're so honored to be able to be of help. So that is where we are. So again, it's incredible to be here and to have gotten so much support and to have learned from this community so much over the last year, few years, to be able to do this work, to do something that actually still, I pinch myself about every day because I cannot believe we're having these kind of results and that games can actually do this. So thank you and have an outstanding conference.